Today, I will finish speaking to my motion that I introduced on November 19th, 2020. This motion would authorize the Standing Senate Committee on Human Rights to conduct Indigenous women in Canada. I will briefly revisit some of the key points I made in November and bring the stories of the women who've been sterilized without consent into this chamber. The stories of these women must be heard, and their experience and wisdom must inform our actions. This horrific practice has affected many generations of Indigenous women and girls. This issue is not one of the past. Tragically, it continues to happen at this very moment in time, with cases being reported publicly as recently as 2018. This epidemic is not just limited to Indigenous women and girls. We have also heard stories from Black women, people with disabilities, and intersex individuals who've been sterilized without consent. The study I am proposing would allow the committee to hear testimony from expert witnesses who've experienced this practice firsthand. This diversity of voices will allow the committee to develop practical recommendations and concrete actions that will end this heinous practice. Despite the government acknowledging and pledging to stop this practice, Indigenous women today continue to be coerced or forced to undergo tubal ligation surgery. Both the Senate Standing Committee on Human Rights and the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health found that more research and data collection is needed in order to understand the full scope of this problem so that definitive action can be taken. These committees are not the only ones calling for further investigations. In December 2018, the United Nations Committee Against Torture urged Canada to conduct an impartial investigation of all allegations and to adopt legislative and policy measures to prevent this practice. Over 2 years has passed since the UN Committee's recommendations were made, and the government has failed to launch an investigation. I'll now tell you about the women who are living through this nightmare and how Canada is failing them. The law firm Samaginus Worm Lombard is leading a class action lawsuit in Saskatchewan. There are over 100 Indigenous women who have joined. This class action has brought to light shocking stories of women being told that they cannot see their newborn babies until they're sterilized. Stories of women giving birth and being harassed to fill out consent forms during or immediately after labor. Women being flagged at the hospital and asked whether they want more children without realizing that their answers will determine if they are sterilized. These are horrifying stories about surgery without consent, and they are not isolated. Senators, some of these women want to share their experiences with you. While these stories may be shocking for some, to those of us who know and have experienced the racism in Canada's healthcare system, these stories sound all too familiar. These survivors want you to know what happened to them, and we all must listen. SAT is a Cree woman who, after giving birth to her 6th child, was presented with a consent form for her sterilization. Upon reading this form, she heard her late husband exclaim, and I quote, "I am not blank blank signing that." She was wheeled into the operating room over her protests. She tried to wheel herself away and escape, but the doctor wheeled her right back in. She repeatedly cried out, "I don't want this," through tears as the nurses held her and administered an epidural. While she was in the operating room, she kept asking the doctor if it was done yet. He reported, "Yeah, cut, tied, and burned. There's nothing getting through that." When SAT was recently asked what she thought about this study, she said, "Forced sterilization has coerced countless Indigenous women across this country. I live with the trauma every day, and I have great fear and distrust of the healthcare system. The federal government and health authorities need to finally be accountable for what they've done. The next steps are to protect future generations." In another example, another Indigenous woman told me that during my spontaneous delivery, I recall being asked if I wanted to have my tubes tied due to a cancellation in the surgeon's schedule. I was in labor for 2 days before going to the hospital. It is well recognized how deep sleep deprivation creates incapacity and that life-changing decisions should not be made while in that state. Yet, within 2 hours of giving birth, I was in the operating room theater getting sterilized. These disturbing experiences point to the critical importance of establishing major safeguards to sterilization procedures and speak directly to the need for greater accountability and consistency when it comes to establishing free, prior, and informed consent to a life-altering procedure. Only those who've experienced the sharp cut of systemic racism, and in this case, the physical act of the slicing, cutting, or burning of the fallopian tubes, can inform and guide what must be done. Without their lived experience and voice, we risk repeating past mistakes and developing solutions that just won't work. In conclusion, I have one more story I'd like to leave you with. An Anishinaabe woman told me about the forced sterilization when she was only 18 years old. How can I fight these people who have already deemed my life unworthy? And what is more, they have deemed my unborn baby unworthy. So much so that they backed me into a corner and deemed my right to bear life as unworthy. They cut me down, and what's more, they cut any chance of me ever having the God-given right to further bear life. This system became my judge, jury, and executioner. What's worse, they became that to my unborn child as well. Since I became a senator, my office has become a clearinghouse for sterilized women seeking help and guidance. I have been vocal about the forced and coerced sterilization of these women, and every time someone learns about it, they are rightly shocked and horrified. My office has worked with grassroots organizations, medical and health communities, human rights groups, nationally and internationally, law societies and universities to spread awareness. Many of the people I have met and talked with can't believe this is still happening in 2021. I know many of you in this very chamber were and are deeply disturbed to hear about this practice and the fact that it is still happening. I have dedicated much of my professional life to righting this horrific injustice, and now I need your help. Colleagues, there's a time to learn, a time to feel, and a time to act. I hope you will support my motion to have this issue studied at the Standing Senate Committee on Human Rights. Our children and grandchildren's children are counting on us to take action. Miigwech, Marcy, merci. Thank you.